My name is Ava. I'm 31 years old, and nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for the moment my brother, Bryce, slapped my 6-year-old daughter, Chloe, across the face at our grandfather's birthday celebration. But worse? Worse was my father's smirk as he folded his hands over his expensive watch and muttered, "Well, someone had to teach her manners." And my mother laughed. A soft, cruel laugh, like it was some amusing scene from a show. They all thought it would blow over, that I would shrink like I always did, that I would fall silent to keep the family image intact. What they forgot was that the room was wired. Hidden microphones were installed for a legacy project meant to capture our family history. Every word, every slap, every laugh. I grew up in the Worthington household. That meant learning early where you stood and how to stay there. My place, the bottom, the disappointment. The sensitive one who cried too much, talked too much, sang too loud. Bryce, on the other hand, was the golden child. Charming, intelligent, athletic. A born winner. He could shove me into the wall and still get praised for standing his ground. My father, Gerald, a retired federal judge, believed in hierarchy, especially within the home. He spoke in rules and punishments. My mother, Diane, played the gracious hostess and perfect wife, but I knew she could twist a compliment into a condemnation with a single smile. I left home at 18 and never really looked back. Until I had Chloe. She changed everything. Her birth was loud and unexpected, 2 weeks early under thunderstorm skies, and somehow still arrived smiling. She had my curly hair and her dad's laugh. I made a promise in that sterile hospital room. This child would never feel small. She would know she mattered. Of course, life had other plans. Her dad and I divorced when she was 4. The details aren't important, just another man who couldn't handle real life, real commitment. So it became just us, me and Chloe. I worked hard at a logistics company in Albany, paid our bills, scraped by, and did my best to make her childhood different than mine. But somewhere deep down, I still believed family could mean something. So when my grandmother called, inviting us to Grandpa's 80th birthday weekend at the family estate in Vermont, I hesitated. Then I said yes. I told myself it was just a weekend, that I could handle it, that Chloe deserved to know her roots, her cousins, her family history. But nothing, not years of therapy, not sleepless nights, not the years I spent learning to bite my tongue, could have prepared me for what actually happened once we stepped through those doors. And how far I would go to protect my daughter when no one else did. We drove up the winding mountain road toward the Worthington estate in near silence. Chloe sat in the back, humming softly, kicking her heels against the seat. Her blue backpack was filled with coloring books, snacks, and the sparkly microphone toy she insisted on bringing in case they have karaoke. "Do you think they'll like my song, Mommy?" she asked, her voice hopeful. I smiled through the ache in my chest. They'd better. It's beautiful. The estate came into view like a painting. Massive stone arches, manicured gardens, and a circular driveway paved in slate. My mother had always treated it like her personal museum, with antique rugs no one was allowed to step on and china that had never held food. Parked up front was my brother's latest toy, a jet black Range Rover with custom plates that read BXX. Bryce always did have a flair for announcing his importance. The moment we stepped out of our modest Toyota, I felt the shift in air, like walking into a pressure chamber. "Hey, look who showed up," a voice called from the stone steps. Bryce descended slowly, holding a tumbler of something amber and expensive, wearing loafers with no socks and a smirk that hadn't aged a day since we were kids. The ghost has returned. Chloe stepped behind my leg, and I placed a hand on her back. "Hi, Bryce." "Chloe, right?" He knelt, extending a hand. "You've grown since I saw you last. What are you now? 5? "I'm 6.5, she said quietly. He laughed like that was somehow funny. Spirited. Just like her mother. Inside, the house was alive with movement. Staff moving trays of hors d'oeuvres. Relatives I hadn't seen in years laughing too loudly. My mother stood at the top of the stairs, perfect in pressed silk and pearls. "Darling," she said, kissing the air beside my cheek. I was beginning to think you'd changed your mind. Your room is the one behind the laundry wing. I had to give the better guest rooms to the couples, of course. Of course. We passed through the great hall, and I noticed the discreet cameras on the bookshelves. Josh, my cousin-in-law, adjusted sound equipment near the fireplace. Documentary project, he said with a shrug. Your dad's idea, legacy footage, audio's always running. Always? I asked, pausing. Every main room, living, dining, lounge, breakfast atrium. Interesting. That night at dinner, Bryce launched into a story about his recent real estate deal, and my parents hung on every word. Chloe tried to speak up once, to say she'd made honor roll in school, but was quickly talked over. That old familiar feeling crept in, the one that whispered, be quiet, be small, be invisible. But this time, I had someone else with me. Someone watching me closely, learning. And I was already starting to realize the danger of that. The morning sun filtered through thin curtains as Chloe bounced onto my bed. Mommy, wake up. Aunt Diane said there's a special breakfast in the golden room. I smiled sleepily. It's called the solarium, honey. She spun in her blue dress, arms wide. Can I sing my new song at breakfast? The one about the butterflies? My chest tightened. Maybe after we eat, okay? Downstairs, the solarium was already buzzing. My father sat at the head of the oversized table, flanked by Bryce and his wife Harper, who gave me a small, polite smile. My mother directed the caterers, tapping Crystal with her nails and commenting on napkin folds. Josh was adjusting his gear again, this time placing a small lav mic under a bouquet. Still recording? I asked in a low voice. He gave a quick nod. Per Gerald's orders. Natural moments. Natural. Chloe skipped over to the kids' table, which had been pushed to the far end of the room. Her cousin sat there, older, sharper, raised in the same hierarchy that shaped Bryce. I saw them exchange glances as she sat down. Use your fork, Chloe, one muttered. You talk a lot, another said, but Chloe, ever the optimist, just smited and started humming to herself. And then she began to sing, soft at first. That sweet little tune about wings and skies and being brave. I saw it unfold in slow motion. Bryce's fork paused halfway to his mouth. His eyes narrowed. My mother's lips tightened. My father sighed audibly and turned a page of the Wall Street Journal. Can someone please control that noise? Bryce muttered under his breath. Chloe didn't hear him. She was lost in her song, twirling a crayon in her hand. Then Bryce stood, abruptly. His chair screeched back across the polished floor. I started to rise from my seat. Bryce, I said firmly, but he didn't stop. He marched across the room in 3 strides, towering over the kids' table. Chloe looked up, smiling. He raised his hand. The sound of the slap echoed against glass and tile. A crack sharp and immediate. Chloe's face snapped to the side. Her coloring book fluttered to the ground. For a moment, no one moved. Then came my father's voice, calm, smug. Well, maybe now she'll learn there's a time and place. My mother sipped her coffee. We always said Ava was too soft. This one's no different. The red print of Bryce's hand glowed on Chloe's cheek like a mark of ownership. I was frozen. Not with fear, not with shame, with rage. When I moved, it was fast. I scooped Chloe into my arms, her little body trembling, her tears silent but hot against my neck. Bryce looked back at me, unrepentant. She was being disruptive, he said flatly. Someone had to teach her. I stared at him, at the man I once called brother, and I said nothing. Not yet. But the rules of our family had just changed forever. Back in our assigned room, tiny, windowless, and cold, I sat on the edge of the bed, cradling Chloe as she sobbed into my sweater. Her cheek was blotchy, the outline of Bryce's hand still fresh, pulsing against her skin. I was just singing, she whispered. Was I bad? That question shattered something in me. No, I said firmly, lifting her chin so she could see the truth in my eyes. You were not bad. You were joyful, and your joy scared people who forgot what that feels like. A knock interrupted us. I froze, positioning myself between Chloe and the door. Who is it? It's Josh, came the quiet reply. Just me. I opened the door a crack. He looked pale, holding his laptop and a flash drive. I got it, he said. The audio, the slap, what Bryce said, your parents' comments, it's all there. My breath caught. He stepped inside and handed me the drive. They're going to ask me to delete everything. I'll say the file was corrupted, but this copy is clean. I stared at it like it was a loaded weapon, because it was. Thank you, I said quietly, emotion rising in my throat. I have a daughter, he said simply. If someone ever touched her like that. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. After he left, I called Leah. She answered on the first ring. What's wrong? She asked immediately. Bryce hit Chloe, I whispered, in front of everyone, and they laughed. There was a pause. Get your things. Come here, tonight. You're not staying in that house one more minute. I looked down at Chloe, still sniffling into her pillow. We're leaving, I told her gently. We're going to Aunt Leah's. You're safe now. She nodded, too tired to smile, but relief flickered across her bruised face. I packed quickly. Clothes, Chloe's toothbrush, the pink bear she wouldn't sleep without. As I zipped our bag, I heard footsteps outside. Diane's voice, cool and clipped. Ava? What are you doing? I opened the door slowly. Leaving. She blinked. Leaving? Over what? That? It was barely a tap. You call that a tap? I stepped aside so she could see Chloe's cheek. The imprint hadn't faded. She's sensitive, Diane said after a beat. Just like you were. Always dramatic. Gerald appeared behind her, face unreadable. You'll regret this. If you walk out that door, don't expect a penny more from us. There it was. The ultimatum, the money leash, the control. Keep it, I said. All of it. Then I walked right past them, Chloe's small hand wrapped in mine. Bryce was in the hallway, leaning against the banister, sipping whiskey even though it wasn't yet noon. Running again? He called. I stopped, turned to face him. No, not running. Just not staying where my daughter isn't safe. I didn't wait for a response, because for the first time in my life, I didn't need one. Leah met us in the driveway with open arms. Chloe clung to her, burying her face in Leah's jacket like she'd found the last safe place in the world. You're okay now, Leah whispered, guiding us into her warm apartment. You're safe. That night, Chloe barely spoke. She didn't ask for her bedtime story. She didn't hum like she usually did. She just curled into a ball beside me on the guest bed and whispered one thing. Can I still sing tomorrow? My chest clenched. Yes, baby, I whispered. No one gets to take that from you. The next morning, I took her to Dr. Fields, her pediatrician, who gently examined the fading red mark and noted her withdrawn behavior. He didn't ask many questions. He didn't have to. After documenting everything, he handed me a referral to a trauma specialist. She's showing signs of acute stress, he said quietly. I'd like her to see a child psychologist, someone who works with children who've been through domestic incidents. I nodded, fighting back tears. My next stop was to see Marissa Kane, an old college friend who now worked as a civil rights attorney. I handed her the flash drive without saying a word. She plugged it into her laptop. The slap. Chloe's startled cry. Bryce's voice calling us both useless. My father's smug remark. My mother's laugh. All of it played in clear, awful stereo. Marissa leaned back when it ended. Well, she said, that's damning. Can I do anything with it? I asked. Legally? She rubbed her chin. Criminally? Maybe. But you'd have to be ready for a nasty legal fight. The Worthingtons have connections. Money. And they'll say it was discipline, not abuse. I looked down. I'm not doing this for money. Then what do you want? I looked up at her, steady. Accountability. Marissa nodded slowly. Then let's document everything. Doctor's report, therapist notes, this audio. Create a file that no one can ignore. Especially not someone who's built his whole image on being the face of corporate responsibility. Bryce, the man who ran PR campaigns for a tech company that donated to children's hospitals and youth centers. The man who coached a Young Leaders of Tomorrow workshop last year. I remembered something he once said at Thanksgiving. My contract's got a morality clause, he bragged. They don't tolerate scandals. Gotta keep squeaky clean. My hands trembled, but my voice didn't. He wants legacy, I said. Let's give him one. Back at Leah's, I found Chloe lying on the floor, coloring quietly. What are you drawing? I asked. She looked up at me and said, A girl with wings. I knelt beside her. Why wings? So she can fly away from mean people. My eyes stung. Not this time, baby. Not anymore. That night, after Chloe fell asleep clinging to her stuffed owl, I sat at Leah's kitchen table with my laptop, the flash drive beside me like a loaded gun. I opened an audio editor. No music, no narration, just the essential parts. Bryce's voice, the slap, Chloe's stifled sob, my father's chilling comment. Well, someone had to teach her some shame. And my mother's laugh, soft, cold, complicit. I trimmed it all down to 1 minute and 22 seconds. Unmistakable, undeniable. Then I wrote 3 emails. The first went to the Ethics and Compliance Division at Sterling Ridge Media, the firm where Bryce was a senior PR executive. The second to the Safe Start Youth Initiative, a nonprofit where Bryce volunteered as a mentor. The third to the Eastwood Community School Board, where he had recently been approved as a guest speaker for student leadership programs. Each email was calm, direct, no drama. I explained who I was, what happened, that the audio spoke for itself. I attached the edited clip and asked them to review it privately and consider what kind of man they were associating with children. Then, after a long breath and one last glance at Chloe's sleeping face through the cracked bedroom door, I hit send. It was done. By morning, the replies had begun rolling in. The Youth Initiative responded first. Effective immediately, Bryce Worthington has been removed from all volunteer and board positions. Thank you for bringing this to our attention. We take the welfare of children seriously. 2 hours later, a terse response from Sterling Ridge. We have received your message and are initiating an internal ethics investigation. This matter is being taken seriously. Then the school board. We were unaware of this incident. Mr. Worthington's future involvement will be under review pending verification of the information provided. By noon, Bryce must have found out. My phone lit up with unknown numbers, then his name. I didn't answer. A voicemail pinged, then another, and then came the texts. What the hell did you do? This is defamation. You'll regret dragging the family into your personal vendetta. And finally, you ruined my life over one slap. I stared at the screen, calm as still water. No, Bryce. You ruined your own life the moment you decided it was acceptable to strike a 6-year-old for singing. Later that evening, Josh called. They're spiraling, he said. Your parents are panicking. Bryce is screaming at the production team to destroy the footage. I smiled grimly. Let him scream. They don't know I gave you a copy, Josh added. But I wanted you to know. Others in the family saw what happened. They're just afraid to speak up. Not anymore, I said. That sound, his hand hitting her face, it's not going to disappear. And neither are we. 3 days after the audio went viral in professional circles, my grandmother Irene called me. I want the truth, she said, her voice steady despite her age. And I want this family in one room. Sunday at 2 p.m. No excuses. I agreed, on one condition. Chloe won't be there. She shouldn't be, Grandma said. This is between adults. But Ava, make them listen. So I went. I left Chloe with Leah and drove to Irene's historic brick home in Middlebury, where I had spent every childhood summer pretending to be someone I wasn't just to survive. When I walked in, the tension hit me like heat off pavement. Bryce was by the fireplace, arms crossed, jaw tight. His wife, Harper, sat several feet away, her body language screaming detachment. My parents sat on the old blue settee, my mother twisting a tissue in her hands, my father staring straight ahead like a general awaiting trial. The rest of the family filled the room. Cousins, aunts, uncles, watching, waiting. Grandma Irene entered last. At 84, she moved slowly but with purpose, her cane tapping the hardwood like a gavel. "I've seen our family weather death, divorce, bankruptcy, and betrayal," she began, "but never shame like this." My father stood. "Mother, if you'll just allow us to explain," she raised her hand. I listened to the recording. The room fell to stone silence. I heard my grandson strike a child, heard his voice call her and her mother useless, heard my son say she needed to learn shame, and I heard Diane laugh like it was funny. My mother went pale. Grandma turned to Bryce. "You hit a child, Bryce, not disciplined, not guided. Struck." "It was a mistake," he muttered, "a reaction." "It was abuse," she corrected, her voice sharp. "And then you doubled down, and the rest of you let him." "I did what you should have done when Ava was a brat," Gerald snapped suddenly. "I taught the girl a lesson." I looked up at him, meeting his eyes. "What lesson did you teach me when I was 6 and you locked me outside in the snow for talking back?" Gasps filled the room. "You're being dramatic," Diane said quickly, her voice brittle. "Am I?" I turned to the others. "Cousin Andrew, did Bryce ever shove your son at the lake house in 21? Andrew shifted uncomfortably. He twisted Zach's arm for throwing a ball indoors. "And you, Aunt Lila? You once told me you saw my father slap me at Thanksgiving but said nothing." Lila looked down. The silence cracked. Then it broke. Voices rose, confessions, guilt, deflection, and finally, truth. Harper stood. "I'm staying with my sister," she announced. "I've lived in fear of his temper for too long. Hearing what he said to a child made me realize I'm next." Bryce's eyes widened. "You can't be serious." "I am," she said. "And I'm done." My parents sat in stunned silence. And for the first time in my life, I did not. 6 months later, the bruise on Chloe's cheek had faded. But the memory hadn't. Not for her, and not for me. The old apartment I once saw as cramped and suffocating had transformed into a haven, a place filled with music, fairy lights, and something I never thought we'd have again. Peace. Dr. Nina Ellis, Chloe's therapist, smiled at me from across her desk during our final session. "She's healing," she said. "She still hesitates around male authority figures, but she's laughing again. And singing." I blinked hard. "She joined the choir at the community center." "Then you've done everything right, Ava." Not long after, I received an email from HR. I'd been promoted to project lead. A real title. A real raise. When I asked my manager why, she said simply, "You've shown poise under pressure. The kind of leadership that protects what matters." With the new salary, I no longer needed my parents' money, which was good, because they hadn't offered it since. My relationship with them had reduced to polite emails. No more guilt trips, no more veiled threats, just distance. And honestly, it was liberating. Bryce, he had been demoted to a non-client-facing role, stripped of board memberships and quietly removed from public-facing initiatives. Sterling Ridge never released a statement, but people knew. And people talked. His perfect image had cracked. Harper finalized the divorce 2 months ago. We still meet for coffee now and then. 2 women who once tolerated too much, finally learning to say, enough. That fall, I was invited to speak at a local parenting workshop. I stood before a room full of tired mothers, confused fathers, and teary-eyed grandparents, and told the story of the moment my daughter asked if she was bad for singing, and how I realized the only way to protect her was to speak the truth, no matter how ugly, how inconvenient, or how deeply buried it was. That moment, I said, changed everything. Then one crisp November afternoon, Chloe stood beside me in our living room, fidgeting with the edge of her dress. "Can I sing for everyone now?" she whispered. I looked around at the guests: Leah, Josh and his daughter, Harper, Chloe's choir teacher, and even Grandma Irene, who now visited us monthly, bringing tea and old family photos. I knelt down. "Only if you want to, sweetheart." Chloe took a deep breath and walked to the center of the room. And then she sang. Not a cartoon song, not a loud performance, just a quiet, beautiful ballad about bravery and finding your voice. The room fell silent. And when she finished, the applause was thunderous. She looked at me and smiled. Not the uncertain, careful smile of someone seeking approval, but the proud smile of a child who knew her voice was hers to keep. And this time nothing and no one could take it away.